Hello, friends. My name is Laura Rezac, and I am the Associate Rector at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And today I'm glad to be with you to read Psalm 127. If you happen to have a Bible or Book of Common Prayer handy, you can turn it open to Psalm 127 and follow along quietly while I give voice to the words. Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, their labor is in vain who build it. Unless the Lord watches over the city, in vain the watchman keeps his vigil. It is in vain that you rise so early and go to bed so late. Vain, too, to eat the bread of toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Children are a heritage from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is a gift. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. He shall not be put to shame when he contends with his enemies in the gate. Psalm 127. This is a short psalm, and folks who might happen to have it in front of you can see that it looks like it's a psalm that's divided into two parts, doesn't it? The first three verses are about the Lord watching over households and cities and individuals, and then the second set of three verses are about children. Scholars think that this psalm actually came from a couple of proverbs that were kind of mashed together to make one psalm. And I'm getting a couple things from it today. From the first set of three verses, I'm reminded that in our journey as Christians, everything we do is with God's help. We even promise that in our baptismal covenant. We don't make promises based on our own power. We say, I will with God's help. Will you continue in the apostles' teaching and fellowship? I will with God's help. Will you respect the dignity of every human being? I will with God's help. So that reliance on God, I think some people might think that some people look from the outside looking in could say, well, that's weak. You're not relying on your own power. You're not standing on your own 2 feet. But I think there's actually something really beautiful about this, that we acknowledge that we mess up, that we are weak, that we are broken. But with God's help, we can do the right thing, that we can live according to the way that Jesus taught us. And then there's that second set of three verses, the set about children. And I do want to name something here. There are many verses in Scripture that can sting, that can be very hurtful. And I know that my LGBTQ brothers and sisters will have an awareness of this, that there are certain texts of terror that have been used to hurt folks in that community. The women also, women will relate to this as well. There are verses that have been used to argue against women's ordination, for example, or women's leadership. So we have those verses. These verses here, they might hurt. Folks who are struggling with infertility, folks who are in a same-gender relationship and can't have children, folks who are single and who maybe always wanted children and that's just not how life has been unfolding. These can be painful verses, and I get that. I can empathize with that. So that's one way to read it, is to focus very much on the individual. Another way that I'm reading this is a reminder for us as a community that children are a heritage from the Lord. You ever been in a church and there's kids running around everywhere and kids going up to the altar when it's time for Eucharist, and there's little coloring books for them, and they're singing along to the songs, and there's babies crying, and Some people in churches like that will be put off. They'll say, "Oh, it's not solemn, it's not reverent, it's not appropriately, holy." Um, but for me, I love that kind of a service. I love it because that's life. That's the blessing of God. That's the next generation that's there in the church worshiping and learning about Jesus Christ. That's amazing. I love that. So I wonder if this could be perhaps a gentle reminder for all of us that the next time we're in a public place, maybe church when we can get back together, or maybe an airplane, or just waiting in line somewhere, and kids start running around or a baby starts crying. I think it's very natural for us all to be grumpy from time to time and to kind of be growly when those kind of things happen. But how wonderful would it be in those circumstances to remember these passages and to remember that that baby that's crying, that those kids that are fidgeting, that they are a heritage from the Lord. They are a gift. I'm really looking forward to the day when all of us, all ages, can gather together again in our beautiful sanctuary, and all of us together can worship. Babies, all the way up through our elderly parishioners and everyone in between. How wonderful will that day be? Be well, friends. Stay safe. Wear your mask, and I'll see you soon.